Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staton, Robbie Williams here to run through some topics. And we haven't had a conversation in an awful long time, Robbie. So it feels like it was worth catching up and running through some of the things that are doing the rounds at the moment. Because even though this is the quietest time in the NFL, there's still a fair bit being discussed with regards to the Seahawks. And let's start at the obvious place. Baker Mayfield's future. There doesn't seem to be a week goes by without some update on Deshaun Watson's legal situation, and therefore there's always the inevitable follow-up to discussing what's going to happen with Baker Mayfield. He's been talking to reporters in the last 24 hours and saying essentially, look, if the Browns want to try and build some bridges, that's up to them. But as far as he's concerned, he thinks both parties are ready to move on. I think bridge building in terms of the Browns right now would probably be offering him even more money than he's on currently, which is $18 million, which I don't think they're going to do. I think I've made it pretty clear what my position is on the Seahawks and acquiring other quarterbacks. I don't think they should. I think they should just muddle through this year and reassess where they are in the next offseason with potentially a high draft pick and just sort of see where the lay of the land is in, whatever it is, 8 months' time now. But what do you think, Robbie? How are you feeling about all of this?
Yeah, listen, I think there is probably some mutual interest between the two parties, right? I'm sure Baker would love to come here. I think Seattle is probably semi-interested, but I don't think they're all that in. I don't know. I don't know if they're. I have a hard time buying that they would go all in to get Baker. I don't think he's that much better than what they currently have. I'd rather see how Drew Lock plays out, and really next year's quarterback classes. We've talked about it in the past, Rob. It's just a fantastic class. Like let's see how we do this year and really go after the quarterback next year. I think when there's smoke, there's fire, and I think maybe there's a little interest, maybe, but I just can't see us trading anything for him, and it just doesn't make any sense. Maybe if he got released, then they would be interested. I think more likely Carolina seems to be more on board with him. But I don't know what's going on in Cleveland, man. They're a dumpster fire. So who knows?
Yeah, a terribly run franchise, appallingly run, in fact, and maybe a little bit of a warning sign to the Seahawks, because there's a lot of talk at the moment about what's going to happen with the future ownership of the Seahawks. I think people are sort of putting a circle around 2024 as the year when potentially there could be a sale, and look whether Jody Allen will do an outright sale or whether she's going to try and cling on to some kind of minority ownership stake or whatever it is. Whoever comes in next, and there will be somebody who comes in next, as the journalist whose name I've completely forgotten, apologies to that gentleman, has made it clear that it says pretty much in Paul Allen's will that the team is to be sold. So it's not a case of if, it is a case of when. Right. And the new owners have to be the right people. And sometimes you can think the right people, Robbie, I know we're going off on a complete tangent here. The right people can seem the right people in the first couple of years, and then you can kind of think, I'm not so sure. And I think David Tepper's a good example of that in Carolina. Everything sounded very positive from Carolina the first couple of years. As we sit here today, the Panthers look a mess. They look a complete mess. Matt Rule looks like a bad coaching appointment. He spent an absolute fortune to bring him in. The GM seems to be playing second fiddle to the head coach, who is a lame duck head coach right now. They've spent ages. They chased around Deshaun Watson like crazy, trying to inherit that mess, that shambles. They probably count the blessings now. But have been sort of trying to find a quarterback solution, like just absolutely desperate to find a prom date. That's kind of how they've been dealing this situation at quarterback. Mm-hmm. And they're no closer to finding it. And now it's like, well, we'll try Sam Darnold and we'll try Matt Corral. And if we can get Baker Mayfield, we'll do that. Or maybe we'll go after Jimmy Garoppolo. And it's just a mess. And in Cleveland, it's even worse. You've just got this ridiculous situation, ownership getting themselves into all sorts of bother off the field, the Deshaun Watson mess, the drama with Baker Mayfield. You could go on and on about what's happening in Cleveland. And the real shame for Browns fans is they've got a good roster.
Oh, yeah.
And the ownership and thus the quarterback situation is going to ruin everything. I bet it's been really stressful the last sort of 2 or 3 months being a Browns fan. Really stressful, because I bet you don't know what to do. And half of the people are out there on the internet defending the team at all costs. Half of the people are out there just despairing about this. I have no envy for that draw. I would much rather be stuck with Geno Smith at quarterback next year and all of that that comes with that than this Deshaun Watson situation. Anyway, gone off on a complete tangent there. To bring it back to Baker Mayfield, I think one way or another, Robbie, I'd like the situation to be sorted because I'm a bit bored of the reporting around the Baker Mayfield thing. So Jacina Anderson, I don't know, she was bored or something herself last week, just kind of threw out
the worst tweet ever.
Well, it may be in the top 10 of bad tweets that Jacina has put out over the years. But it was a complete out of nowhere, felt like she was doing someone a favor tweet, which, look, if we're being really honest, and I know people get quite sniffy about how journalism works these days, and we all kind of want everybody to be a Pulitzer Award-winning ethical masterpiece of a journalist. That's not how it works. And there will be times when agents ring up journalists and say, do me a favor, just stick this out there, will you? And in return for doing that one tweet, which is, you might have to, bite your tongue a little bit and, you cringe a little bit when you're sending that tweet out, but it pays dividends down the line when you break 3 stories, in a few months' time or when free agency starts or whatever. So I guess that's what was going on there. That would be my projection, guess as to what that tweet was all about. But it kind of stokes it all up again. And then you get stuff like there's this guy, I don't know if you saw the tweet this week, Robbie, some random dude, but he's got a blue tick, so he must be legit. I mean, he's obviously not. I mean, you just have to look at his profile to realize that this guy was not a legit reporter. Put out last year that a trade was being finalized. The members of the Seattle media quote tweeting it, retweeting this tweet. It suddenly gathered momentum. People were discussing it. It had legs. 24 hours later, not a single thing has been said. Baker Mayfield's even done an interview since then. I mean, if a trade was imminent, I doubt he'd be doing that. And talking about his future and almost asking the Browns to sort of build a few bridges. I'm bored of all this stuff, Robbie. It's frustrating. I think we all need to move on, including Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. We all need to know what's going to happen here. But because the Browns have screwed their own leverage, this is probably going to get taken right through to the day before training camp at this point. Yeah,
I mean, at this point, you're right. And I mean, this is that boring time of the off season where it's just like, a couple things happen here and there, but for the most part, it's just boring all around in general. I mean, we could move on and talk about the DK Metcalf situation and
we will.
I'm sure we will. But I'm just saying, like, this time of year just kind of sucks as an NFL fan. But ultimately, I think with Baker Mayfield, you're right. Like, it's drawn out, and I think there's sides playing. I could see people saying here in the chat that it's Baker's side leaking some information, trying to get the Carolina to buy in more or whatever the case might be. But yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of fluff right now, and I'm not really sure what to take of it. Mostly I'm over it as well. I don't think Baker ends up in Seattle as a trade. If he gets released, maybe it's possible, but I don't think that's likely.
And that's what I can't work out with the situation, Robbie, is what happens if you get to training camp and the Browns are not getting what they want. Are they going to sit on Baker Mayfield? Are they going to ask him to come to camp? Does he come to camp? Do they want? I mean, here's the situation. Imagine Deshaun Watson. I read somewhere earlier today. I don't know what the latest is, that the NFL is going to push for at least a year-long suspension for Deshaun Watson, which could bring Baker Mayfield back into it. They might have to pay him an extra $2 million to come back and play and build those bridges. But it kind of opens the door for that. But then if it doesn't, or if it's not a season-long suspension, are you really going to want in your quarterback room Baker Mayfield sitting in there with Jacoby Brissett and or Deshaun Watson? I'm not sure that the Browns want that after they called him a child. I think that I'm not suggesting for a second that he's going to be a problem child in that room and be a nightmare and make things even worse. But I don't know. That to me is the worst possible room to have in your team facility where you have a dissenting voice. And I don't know if they're going to want that. And it may come to the point that they just take this through. They've got, they think, oh, well, if we cut him the day before training camp or now, what difference does it make? We'll just sort of wait to see if somebody steps up to the plate. We'll try and drum up a bit of interest maybe through Jacina Anderson. I don't know. Who knows where that report came from? It's that might be what they do. And then maybe they release him. I have no idea. If someone is going to trade for him, I think it's going to be a conditional pick, a really low conditional pick, and they end up paying $4, $5, $6 million of his contract, and the Browns just get something out of this deal.
Yeah.
Would the Seahawks do that? I have no idea. I'd love to know what their plan is, Robbie, because if their intention is to trade for Baker Mayfield, I'd be tempted to say, just get it done. If that's really what you want to do, you've kind of waited this out, just find a deal that both teams can live with now. But if your idea is, we don't really want him, but we'll take him if he's available, then fine. They're doing exactly the right thing. My one fear is, Robbie, is that they actually do really want him and they're planning on maybe having him. And are they going to execute this, or are they end up going to overpay more than they should? I don't know. But I genuinely think that...
You mean the Seahawks overpay in a trade? That would be shocking.
I mean, I don't think... I mean, if I had to predict what will happen right now, I think he will probably go to somewhere like Carolina for a really cheap deal.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how this plays out. And then the other quarterback to talk about is Jimmy Garoppolo. What happens there? Because this is a really intriguing situation, because he's due $25 million. It won't cost the Niners anything to release him and to move on. Do they want to pay $25 million for a backup quarterback this year? I mean, maybe, because Trey Lance is an unknown and Garoppolo has got them to 2 NFC Championship games and 1 Super Bowl. But at the same time, Robbie, if he gets injured in training camp, they're on the hook for $25 million for nobody. No backup quarterback, no nothing. So do they actually want him at training camp off the back of a shoulder injury, and all he would need to do is go, it's gone again, I need surgery again, and they're on the hook for $25 million. And then if he gets to week 1, his salary is guaranteed. So if he gets injured after 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week, salary is guaranteed. They're stuck with it. So they need either Garoppolo to take less money, they need a trade, or they need to make a decision to cut him. Well, they know if they cut him at any point before the first week of the season, he could end up with the Seahawks, and they don't want to help the Seahawks out.
I think that's exactly right. I think that's why he's still on the Niners right now, is I think they're afraid that he'll come to Seattle and make the Seahawks better. I've never been the biggest Jimmy G fan, but he is a heck of a lot better than what we have than Drew Lock. I mean, maybe there's something out of Drew Lock that we could untap, but I mean, as of right now, it seems like he would be a better option than Lock and Geno Smith, obviously. But I just think that's why he's on that roster. And you're right. I think something will probably have to happen before training camp, because if they bring him in and he gets injured, that's $25 million guaranteed. And I don't think they want to take that risk. So I think they're hoping that Carolina comes in and tries to make a trade. And I think maybe the domino will fall first after Baker gets traded or whatever the situation happens there. I think that's what happens. And then, I think as a team probably trying to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo, you have to make sure his shoulder's okay. And I think that's probably the other aspect of it too. And why maybe another is why he hasn't actually been traded. You're not sure, how his shoulder is going to handle, throwing, but he's supposed to start throwing soon. So maybe that'll be an indication of what's actually going to happen to him.
It's such a complex situation with Garoppolo, because from his point of view, he wants to be in training camp week 1 with a new team, learning the playbook, getting to know his teammates. If he feels that he has no future in San Francisco, there's no benefit to him playing the game to go through training camp, even if they say, look, Jimmy, don't do anything, we want to rest your shoulder. If they have no intention of paying him $25 million, all he does by waiting to the week before training camp is screw his own leverage, because then they can say, look, Jimmy, where are you going to go now? There's nowhere for you. No one's making a trade offer. We're not going to release you. Or maybe they are going to. We will release you, but you'll not be able to start straight away. You've missed training camp. We want you to take a $10 million pay cut. Then he's blown the situation. He almost needs to force their hand at the start of training camp. But how does he do that? How does he do that unless somebody will come forward and offer San Francisco a trade that makes sense for them right away? And who's going to do that with an injured shoulder, with only 1 year security, and then having to pay him the money that San Francisco doesn't want to pay him? I mean, the Seahawks don't want to inherit $25 million. What they want is Jimmy Garoppolo to be a free agent and then to negotiate their own contract with him, for whether that's 1 year, 2 year, whatever. Now, for me, Robbie, I prefer Garoppolo, the player, to Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield's a big name and he's got the luster of the first overall pick. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo is the better player. I don't think either of them have got a good deep throw. So it's not as if Baker's particularly good there. But I think Garoppolo can play within a system. He has had more success. I have watched plenty of games where, yes, Jimmy Garoppolo has played poorly against the Seahawks and thrown turnovers. I've also seen games where I felt like the San Francisco offense, when it's running the ball and he's playing point guard, looked pretty unstoppable at times. And I think if you were going to create the ideal situation for the Seahawks, and I wonder if they've thought this, and I may well write about this, Robbie. How have the Kansas City Chiefs played this situation? They brought in Alex Smith. I think they traded a high pick for Alex Smith. Was it something like a second rounder or something like that for Alex Smith? I don't know if it was quite as high as that, but it was a. I'm sure they traded a decent pick for Alex Smith to bring him in to run Andy Reid's offense, and then they traded up from the 20s to go and get Patrick Mahomes. And I wonder if the Seahawks, Robbie, are thinking potentially that they could get somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo to be a 1, 2, 3-year starter, maybe. And then next year they go and, if they can't get the quarterback they want, you trade up and go and get him. And you have the Mahomes situation. And you sit them behind Garoppolo and you have him as the go-between quarterback. That is kind of... I suspect that might be an ideal situation, Robbie. Because Garoppolo's run a system, he can run the offense that Shane Waldron wants to run. Yep, the deep ball's not going to be that quite as good. But then, unless you're starting Drew Lock, the deep ball's not going to be good anyway. And Drew Lock might struggle with all the other stuff. But, the evidence in Denver wasn't great, fresh start and all of that. But who knows? Maybe just not good enough. You see where I'm coming from? That could be a plan for them. While we're sort of sat here saying tank and go for not so much tank, but be prepared to be bad almost.
Right.
No, don't give up on the season. But if you're bad, you're bad. You come back and you reassess next year with a rookie quarterback. They might be thinking Garoppolo could get us in the playoffs. We have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks. Maybe they'll have even more if they trade DK Metcalf. You've got ample ammunition to move up and draft a quarterback if needs be.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And I feel like this offseason has been they played it really well so far as like the draft. I think they did. I mean, like I said, I gave them an A out of the draft. That was fantastic. My only gripe so far on the offseason has really been the amount of money that they paid Will Dissly, and maybe even to the point of even Quandre Diggs, just because we have so much resources tied up into the safety position, and then maybe not attacking that center position, which I've been talking about for a long time. But for the most part, I really liked what they've done this offseason. It's felt different than what they've done in the past. I think trading for Baker Mayfield would be a desperate knee-jerk reaction, but waiting on a player like Jimmy Garoppolo would be a smart move. And I could see that being a scenario where you get Garoppolo when he's released from San Francisco, you come in and then you give yourself a chance to compete this year and still have those draft picks to trade up if you need to next year. I could see that.
And here's the other thing, Robbie, is we can sit here and say, well, what a quarterback class. They should wait on the draft. Just a quick reminder here. And I have to remind myself this as well, as someone who has advocated a lot for draft, focus on the draft, stuff like that. There's no guarantee that Bryce Young is going to turn pro. We'll see what happens in Alabama this year. He's won a Heisman. Let's just imagine a situation, Robbie, where Alabama don't win the national championship this year. Could he be the kind of player who says, I'm going to come back for another year to try and win a national championship? I came to Alabama to win a title, and I want to do that before I leave. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. CJ Stroud, maybe he will do something similar. Who knows? I don't think they would both do that, but I don't think CJ Stroud's quite as good as people think anyway. And he might not be Seattle's cup of tea, to coin a phrase over here. And Will Levis will turn pro because of his age. Tyler Van Dyke might not turn pro. He's only had half a season starting in Miami. So there's no guarantee that he's going to turn pro either. So what I'm sort of looking at as a top 4 right now, Robbie, that could quickly become a top 1 or a top 2. And if you are having to trade into the top 2 picks to get at those guys, it becomes really challenging for you. And you could be sat in a situation next year where you don't have a veteran quarterback, you don't have a means to acquire a veteran quarterback, and you don't have the means to draft a quarterback. What do you do then? So actually getting somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo now and saying, okay, we'll sign you to a 2 or 3 year deal. We are going to see how it goes. And look, maybe they'll still be bad anyway, and they'll pick in the top 10. It's happened that, Garoppolo got injured in the Niners pick 2nd overall with Nick Bosa. So it has happened with the Niners. They've still been in position to draft a quarterback early. But if the Seahawks are drafting 16th or 20th or 25th, I don't think they're going to go any higher than that. You've got the picks to trade up. So that's all I'm saying. This is not me advocating for Jimmy Garoppolo or anything like that. I don't want to be stuck in quarterback mediocrity forever. And I think you have to be picking quite early to get a quarterback, and the earlier the better, really, because if you don't have to give up any picks, fantastic. You can build up your team in the way that the Bengals have done, let's say. And I also think you want to be at the head of the queue to get the quarterback you want, not the quarterback who's left, which is kind of what the Niners had with Trey Lance.
Right, agreed.
So,
they traded a lot to get him.
Yeah, and I don't want to give up 3 first-round picks to do that. I hope there's a better deal out there, and that's another counter to this. The Garoppolo idea is that if you have to pay 3 first-round picks, you don't want to be doing that. Even if you've got 2 next year, you don't want to get 1 the year after as well to get this quarterback situation, and then get no immediate return on that investment. So, but I can see why they may feel to do that, to have somebody you can at least sell as an idea to a fan base that you're not just giving up on the season and the imminent future, whilst also knowing that you've got the stock to trade up if needs be. Just saying, it's an idea that people may want to discuss. And we've had a super chat here from Phil Alicia 2004. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate your support for the channel. If you want to send in a super chat, please do. Don't forget to subscribe and to like this video. Yes, the videos have been a little on the light side over the summer while I've been working on my tan and concentrating on the day job. But that season will come around soon enough, and we'll be back on here all the time talking Seahawks. I think this is the best place for Seahawks conversation. But then I would say that I'm biased.
I'm biased. I agree with you.
But subscribe and you'll not miss any of the videos. And I will upload this to the Rebuild podcast.
Hey, and I'll just say this. Not only has Rob been working on the day job and doing a little traveling with the family, he also celebrated a birthday last Thursday. So if you hadn't know that, everyone wish him a happy birthday. Yeah.
That's true. 23 years old. Can you believe it?
That's right, man. I hit 23 again.
23 plus 15. As you get older and older, you still you start to realize that you're getting, oh my God, I'm now that age. Like I can remember sort of starting this blog, it is a fresh-faced 20-something, and here we are. I'm nearly 40 years old now. So. And thank you to those of you being there from the start all the way back in 2008, which feels like a long time ago now. Okay, right. We've got plenty more topics to discuss here, Robbie. We've had a good go at the quarterbacks. You mentioned on something about how they've spent their money for next year, or how they've spent their money on people like Disney and stuff like that. I want to come back to that topic as well. But I feel like I want to jump to DK Metcalf, because that's the big storyline involving players on the Seahawks right now. We've had this news today that Terry McLaurin has signed a contract extension. So you've now got McLaurin added to the long list of players who have been signed to new deals. I mean, given that the market has completely exploded, I don't think the NFL's reaction has been the smartest thing. I know there are certain players who, immediately as soon as contracts get signed, they're going to ask for more money, or they're going to feel like I'm due a contract, and teams kind of rush to get there because they don't want to be the ones who are last to pay, end up paying the most, which is the situation, funny enough, that the Seahawks are soon going to find themselves in. But, Christian Kirk got that huge obscene contract in Jacksonville. We've then seen Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, AJ Brown, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp all get massive extensions. And now Terry McLaurin is the latest. There's only Deebo Samuel left of the guys who are out of contract next year. And then you've got Justin Jefferson next year, Robbie, who's going to expect a contract. And the Minnesota Vikings are not going to waste any time paying him if he has another season like these first 2 in the NFL. So I'm looking at this situation now. I don't really understand what's going on. The framework for a contract is there. And people are going to say, well, the Terry McLaurin deal is a framework. It's not. AJ Brown is the framework. They were both drafted in round 2. They both had similar impacts. And yet Terry McLaurin's a fantastic player. But I think and the fact that there's the connection between AJ Brown and DK Metcalf, I think they've got the same agent. I think McLaurin's got the same agent as well, to be fair. I'm sure I've seen that somewhere. But the point is I think the Brown one, the fact that that's also a little bit more, you cannot go into a negotiation with DK Metcalf and say, well, Terry McLaurin's deal's a little bit less than AJ Brown's. And DK Metcalf's not going, well, okay, I'll take, I don't know, whatever, $1 million or $2 million less than my best friend playing in Philadelphia now is taken. He's going to go, no, give me AJ Brown money. And I think the problem is, Robbie, is I don't think the Seahawks want to pay $25 million a year for a wide receiver. But if they didn't want to pay $25 million for a wide receiver, why didn't they trade him before the draft? I mean, we saw Brown traded and Hollywood, AJ Brown and Hollywood Brown traded during the draft. They could have done a deal or some kind to move on from this situation during the draft, and people would have just moved on with them. So they made their decision to keep DK Metcalf the moment they decided not to trade him. I don't really understand this situation at all. This should have been done as soon as AJ Brown signed his contract. They should have gone to DK and gone, okay, AJ Brown's got this. Let's do a deal off the basis of that. And if they have no interest in paying DK Metcalf that, they should trade him. But they should have done it by now. And what I fear, and I wrote about this on SeahawksDraftBlog.com, was my fear is that we'll have this same situation that they had before with Frank Clark, which is they look at the market, and the market back then was, for Frank Clark, $14.4 million. That was the deal that the pass rusher, Danielle Hunter, signed in Minnesota, and they said, too much. Danielle Hunter had the same number of sacks as Frank Clark. Minnesota took a chance on Hunter, and it paid off. Seahawks didn't. They waited a year. Frank Clark has a breakout season, 13.5 sacks. They decided to franchise tag him. It already cost them more than $14.4 million a year. It's a $17 million contract. That sets the negotiating point at $17 million. And then how they did not know that DeMarcus Lawrence was going to get a contract of what he did, which was $20 million, $21 million or something. He'd been tagged twice. The Cowboys couldn't tag him again. They had to do a deal with him, or they had to trade him. And if they traded him, somebody else would have signed that deal. There was no possible... The only chance was that he would play on that second franchise tag and then become a free agent. But Jerry Jones doesn't work that way. He doesn't let guys leave. He pays them, and he overpays them at times. So he signs a massive contract in Dallas. The Seahawks panic. They trade Frank Clark. Whether you think that was a good trade or not in hindsight, the fact is that Seahawks pass rush has been crap ever since. They've been trying to replace Frank Clark ever since. They've done a horrible job in the subsequent 3 years trying to replace Frank Clark. They spent a first-round pick on LJ Collier trying to replace Frank Clark that year. They did a bad job of that. And my worry, Robbie, is that they'll just play out this year with DK Metcalf. They will then franchise tag him in the offseason. That Justin Jefferson will then sign a massive contract, which makes this situation even worse. And they will trade him, and it will not end well for the Seahawks. That is my concern. I still think they're going to sign him this season because I think they would have dealt him before the draft if they were going to do that. But as much as I think Carroll said in an interview recently, look at our track record of getting deals done. Yeah, I've seen your track record of waiting and waiting and waiting, and it costing you an absolute fortune, and it costing you in terms of Frank Clark. When you've got ahead of the game with Cam Chancellor back in the day and with Tyler Lockett twice, you have looked really good. You have not got ahead of the curve with DK Metcalf. You should have paid him as soon as there was a chance to pay him at the start of the new league year. And by not doing that, I think it's going to cost them money, Robbie. That's my fear.
No, and I agree. And I think the price just keeps going up the longer they wait. I mean, what happens if Deebo Samuel actually signs an extension in San Francisco and it's, going to be for more money than anyone else is making? DK is going to want that money too. They've waited too long. They should have pulled the trigger a long time ago. And now they've set themselves up where they're going to have to probably overpay more than they wanted to originally, and just to keep him. And if their plan is to, we'll just ride it out this year and see how it goes, not only are you causing more locker room distraction, you're going to cause, DK to, what if he has a poor year? Then with Geno Smith and Drew Lock playing quarterback, or whoever you have playing, what if he has a poor year with these new quarterbacks? Then you run into a situation next year where you could just straight up lose him and he goes to somewhere else and flourishes under a better quarterback, or you try to franchise tag him again and you're in the same boat. I don't know. It's just poor decision all around. I don't understand. This is the one thing, actually, Big Mike said it earlier. He's like, he disagreed with me on the offseason Big Mike, love you. Thank you for always commenting. But the one thing is that they did handle this situation wrong. I did say I was happy with the offseason, or maybe I was just more happy with the draft. But this is one situation that's very frustrating, and I don't understand it at all. It makes zero sense why they didn't handle the situation prior, and they've had every opportunity to make this happen. And I agree with you. I do think at some point they'll probably get this deal done, but it's probably going to be a number that's going to make us go, okay, there goes a lot of the cap space that we had for next year, and it's going to look, tough.
And I can now segue into that next topic because I think it's a really important one. Very quickly, Reflect the Sun, thank you for the super chat there, and thank you for the birthday wishes for Thursday. And Big Mike says, 100% agree about DK and the possibility of becoming another Frank Clark situation. Look, I really hope not, but I'm looking at these numbers now, Robbie, and I also look at and I wrote an article about this again. Check out SeahawksDraftBlog.com. The article is titled, Where's the Money Gone? Posted it a week ago. And I think this is a topic that no one's talking about. When you hear people discussing, I read an article by Brady Henderson, who's a really good job at ESPN, covering the Seahawks. But he talked in his article that he posted this week about the Seahawks having loads of money to spend in the next offseason. And I thought, hang on a minute, can we just sort of take a step back here, and can people discuss this more in the media? Because this is a really important topic that I don't think a lot of fans are aware of. The reason that I called this article, Where's the Money Gone? Is because when the Russell Wilson trade went down and we were having those reaction streams, Robbie, and we were writing about it and the benefits of the trade versus the negativity of losing Russell Wilson, one of the benefits was that they had $120 million of cap space to spend in 2023, next offseason. Now, you can do a lot of damage with that. And we've seen teams do this. When the Patriots moved on from Tom Brady, it wasn't the immediate moment when Brady left that they had the cap space. It was a year later, same with Russell Wilson. There's a big dead cap hit for Seattle that will not feel the benefit of Wilson being off the books until next year. And then the Patriots went out and basically rebuilt their roster in free agency. They signed a load of big-name free agents, and they went from a 7-win team to a 10-win team with a rookie quarterback. Now, that is something that the Seahawks are probably going to hope to do if indeed it is a rookie quarterback next year. So they need the ability to go and spend and add talent to their roster. I think we can all agree on that. And $120 million would allow you to do that. I went last week and had a look at how much cap space Seattle has, knowing it was $120 million in March or whenever it was that the trade went down. It's now down to $53 million. And they have spent $62 million on Quandre, this is of next year's cap, on Quandre Diggs, whose cap hit next year is $18.1 million, which is about as much as Minkah Fitzpatrick's record-setting average for his deal in Pittsburgh. Quandre Diggs is coming off a serious injury, and he will have played another year of football when he's due that $18.1 million. Uchenna Nwosu is due $12.8 million next year. Maybe he will prove to be a bargain based on how he plays this year. But that's a lot of money for an unknown. Will Disley's cap hit next year for a blocking tight end is $9.25 million. Noah Fant's going to cost you $6.8 million. That could be a bargain, depending on how he plays, if he lives up to the first-round billing. Quinton Jefferson is going to cost you $6 million next year. Charles Cross will cost you $5 million. That's fair enough. Top 10 pick salary. And Brian Manet is going to cost you just short of $4 million next year because of his new contract. So that's $62 million on that group. If we take Cross out of it, because, we all hope that he plays really well as a top 10 pick, that means the rest of those guys will have cost you $56.7 million. Now, that is incredible. And by the way, that number is going to come down because they haven't signed all of their rookies yet. So I think people like Kenneth Walker haven't got a contract. So that $53 million will come down even more in terms of the cap space for next year. So, by the time they actually get to next offseason, Robbie, they'll have about as much cap space to spend next year as they had this year with Russell Wilson's dead cat hit. And they haven't been able to do much with that. And they will not have the ability to go and spend lots of money. And yeah, sure, you can backload contracts. You can give low first-year cap hits, and they will have cap space to spend down the road. They can definitely do that. They can also create cap space. We know that teams can do this, and they can move on from Quinton Jefferson and save $4 million. They can move on from Will Disley and save $3 million. They can move on from Al Woods and save 3.8. They can cut Monet and save 2.8. But then they'd have to replace those guys. And by the way, it's not DK Metcalf who you're going to have to pay. And if you pay DK Metcalf as much as AJ Brown got, AJ Brown's cap hit in the first year of the new money, Robbie, is sort of $8-9 million, I think. So if you take another $9 million, let's say that that's what the deal that Metcalf signed. You take another $9 million off the 53, it comes closer to 40 then. And then if you don't, all right, you may not replace these guys with big money signings, but Poona Ford's a free agent. Sidney Jones is a free agent. Both quarterbacks are free agents. Your starting center is a free agent. Austin Blythe. Ryan Neal is a free agent. He's played pretty well. Rashad Penny is a free agent. If he plays well again, you're going to want to let him walk if you fix your running game. Do you see where I'm coming from here? All of a sudden, that cap space is going to be really low next year. And rather than having the potential to go out and spend, like people assume, they're not going to be able to do that. It's going to be a typical Seahawks offseason. And when they haven't had a lot of money to spend, Robbie, they've resorted to overpaying for familiarity. The Bruce Irvins, the Will Disleys, like they've done just recently. The guys the Quinton Jeffersons, the players that we know, the good old guys who we know and when they know us and we know them. And they go and do stuff like that. And then they go and bring in a whole bunch of, depth players, the BJ Finneys and Benson Mayoas who just aren't good enough, and Cedric Abuis and people like that. This is how they've got themselves into trouble, Robbie. I don't want to be negative on the 28th of June talking about the Seahawks. It's very, very early in this rebuild.
Well, I mean, you also forget how much they paid Geno Smith.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, Robbie, is you cannot look at this situation where they've suddenly got $53 million to spend next year, and that will definitely come down unless they're willing to trade DK Metcalf, and then they will have to find a way to replace DK Metcalf, by the way.
Exactly.
If you cannot look at the situation and go, that's a job well done for the Seahawks. You have to be honest about this. I gave the draft an A+. I would give their use of finances over the last 5 years a Z+. I mean, it doesn't even warrant an F for fail. It's not good enough. They waste money better than anybody. They have this uncanny knack of spending tens of millions of dollars on crap and just average players. And they don't improve their roster when they spend these tens of millions. The Quandre Diggs salary, you sometimes have to go, we can't pay that. We cannot have Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs earning $40 million of our cap hit next year. You've just got to be honest about it and say, okay, we've paid Jamal. And if you and look, I don't think that's I'm worried about those two, Robbie, even playing 15 games next year because of the injuries that they've had. And they've committed so much to that position. It's a bad use of money. And whoever is making the cap decisions there, whoever is in charge of Seattle's cap structure, they need to have a serious think about that, who does that job. Because we all sit here going, how do the Rams do it? They keep signing their big names to massive extensions. They keep these world-class players together, and then they go and keep adding more. They'll go and get another and another and another, and they win Super Bowls. And we all go, how are they going to do it? They're going to fall flat on the face next year. They're going to fall flat on the face the year after. And it never happens. They stay competitive. I'm not saying the Seahawks should just be the Rams, or they can emulate, because if everybody could do what the Rams do, they would do it. But surely there's a happy medium between spending $50-60 million on the list of players I've just read out and what the Rams do. There's got to be an in-between somewhere where the Seahawks can actually make use of their cap space and make it work for them to improve their team, not just relying on hitting in the draft.
Yeah, totally agree. I don't, the whole thing just doesn't make any sense when you talk about signing Quandre Diggs. And listen, I love Diggs, nothing but respect to that guy. But I mean, yeah. Really what it comes down to me is the Jamal Adams trade and what you paid for him. And I hate to just keep harping on that as much as I can, but you start looking at his contract, and I was just trying to look to see how much a dead cap hit would be if we cut him or traded him. It was $21 million or something if we did it after the season. Well, sorry, you were muted. I didn't hear you say.
Which player did you say?
Jamal Adams.
Yeah, there is an out. There is an out after this season, I'm sure that. And this is where Curtis will correct me because he knows a lot. I
thought that out was after 2024, but maybe. So yeah, is Curtis watching?
if you cut him after, if you cut him after this season, you will. Okay, yes, this is true. So if you cut him after this season and designate him as a post-June 1st cut, so it's what they did with Carlos Dunlap, essentially, you will save $11 million if you do that next offseason. I think that is true.
Yeah, Curtis just said that.
If you trade...
21.3 in dead cap space.
Now, you can't trade... This is the problem you've got. Because if you trade him before June 1st, you will inherit another $3 million in dead cap hit. So if you trade him next year, you'd essentially be buying a draft pick because it would cost you $21 million next year to have the draft picks. Now, for someone like Russell Wilson, when you're getting a whole bunch of picks, it is easy to trade somebody and say, we'll take on a dead cap hit, in my opinion, knowing that you're going to have the benefit down the line. If you trade Jamal Adams, what are you going to get? A bag of footballs at this point?
Yeah, you're not getting anything for him right now. No.
I mean, what are you willing to take on a $21 million cap hit? Well, you're a second round pick. I mean, no one's going to give you a first. So, yeah, I don't think anyone will give you a second or a third. I mean, I think we're in the sort of, we want to trade Earl Thomas, but no one wants him territory with Jamal Adams, I think, next year, unless he has a barnstorming season. And then maybe if he repairs his value, you can go, actually, do you know what? This is a good time to get out of this. But then I bet if he has a good season, knowing Pete Carroll, like, rock and roll. He's going again. He's back. Yeah. Jamal's back. So
I guess my point, all this is kind of just what you're saying is there's too much resources tied into one position. I mean, you've seen it happen time and time again. Is they overload a position with money, and then they pick and choose like little players to pick in, especially like on the offensive line or anything like that. And they're overspending on areas that it's not a need. You should be beefing up that offensive line and that defensive line, build the trenches, and that's where you should spend your money. And then the quarterback, but they're not doing that. And I think that's where my point to bring up the Jamal Adams thing is, again, is just simply the fact that they've overpaid on the safety position, and they've kind of put themselves in a really hard place. I mean, they still have money to spend. I see a bunch of people talking about ways of getting more money on the books and things that they can do. But I mean, in the long run, you still have to replace some of these players, like Rob was saying, and it's not just that easy. Just they're like, well, just cut these guys and then go, maybe draft someone as a 7th rounder who comes into place for pennies. When really you want those guys to be good, and we want to be able to pay our guys, but when you're overpaying for Will Dissly, who's a blocking tight end, and you're paying way too much money in the safety position, it's just not smart resources that you're using.
I'm just having a look now. I've not looked at this, so it may or may not reinforce my argument or not. I want to look at the cap hits for the Rams this year and the highest cap hits. I'm trying to find it. Spot Track doesn't want to play ball. Here we go. So these are their highest cap hits. Robbie, you tell me if this is the right way to sort of invest and spend your money. So highest cap hit for this year is Aaron Donald, $24 million. Then it's Jalen Ramsey, 23.2. Then it's Cooper Kupp, 17.8. Then it's Matt Stafford, 13.5. So your top 4 highest paid players are your core, your blue chip core. Rob Havenstein's then the 5th highest paid player. He's on $9.5 million for a right tackle. They're paying too much for Ashawn Robinson, 9.5. Tyler Higbee, 8. Leonard Floyd, 8. Allen Robinson's cap hit's only 4.3. Note Boom, the left tackle's contract is 3.5. You could argue that's a tremendous amount of value for them. So look, they have that's according to Spot Trap. That is their sort of how they're spending their cap this year. This is where the Seahawks are spending their money this year. So Seattle's highest paid player is Poona Ford. Then it's Tyler Lockett, which is understandable. Then it's Jamal Adams. Then it's Gabe Jackson. Then it's Uchenna Nwosu. Then it's Chris Carson. You see where the problem is? Like this is they've traded Russell Wilson and they cut Bobby Wagner, but let's be real here. They should be paying their money to different people right now. You have to be sort of in the top paid players on your team. You need those star players who are genuine stars who've delivered for you. And they've ended up spending money for people like Jamal Adams instead and trying to create these stars who played well for other teams and fit them in, and it hasn't worked. And if they trade DK Metcalf away and he goes and plays for a team with a top quarterback and delivers for the next 5-6 years, and that'll end up being a bargain, and the Seahawks will look ridiculous. And that will be part of their problem they're thinking now, Robbie, is they'll be scared to death of trading this guy away, having already traded for Jamal Adams and that being a huge bust. If they then trade DK Metcalf away for less and he goes and has massive success somewhere, they're going to look ridiculous. So they're going to be scared to, and that's why I think they'll end up paying him, because they'll be frightened of having that scenario play out. But they need to, essentially what's come down to is not drafting well enough, first and foremost. Who you need to have drafted well over the last few years, and they've been drafting the wrong positions, they've been drafting the wrong players. They should be having sort of 3, 4, 5 guys that are the core of your franchise right now. At the top of that, not suggesting for a second that means they should be competing for Super Bowls every year, but you should have 4 or 5 guys, even in this point of a reset rebuild, where you can say, okay, they're the guys that we're going to build around here. We've paid them, we've drafted them, they're our homegrown stud players. And instead, they're paying guys like Adams and Diggs and hoping that they're going to get a few more years out of them. And there's massive question marks there. And yet, Tyler Lockett's been a success story. He's been here a long time and they did a great job with his contract. It's not all bad news, but this is where the problem with the drafting is. They haven't drafted well enough over the last 5-6 years. They haven't been re-signing their guys and building their guys and building their team. So, it's a problem. And I think that this is going to be the frustrating thing for me, Robbie, is that if this season goes badly, then we're going to get to December. And I think we're going to hear a lot of people in the media going, don't worry, they've got a lot of money to spend next year. And it's not going to be true. And it's not, the Bears, for example, have nearly $100 million to spend, because what they've done is they've got the rookie quarterback already, but they've basically gutted their roster in preparation for a reset. They're kind of doing what Seattle's doing, is doing it differently. And they've got the quarterback in the building already. They've already traded up for him. But they've gutted everything. They've got a new coach. They've got a new GM. They're resetting. They're taking it. They've got $100 million to spend next year, and I bet they will spend it in reshaping their team. The Seahawks are going to end up going into it with 60, 70 million less than the Bears to spend. This is a problem, and it is something we should be discussing. And, without wanting to beat a dead horse, and I know there will be people in their head in their hands as they know what I'm going to say next. Part of the problem they haven't drafted well enough, Robbie, is because they traded for Jamal Adams, because he's taken 2 first-round picks off the board that could have gone on players that were cheap contracts, good value for the next couple of years that you eventually pay. And that is a problem for Seattle. I think we've lost Robbie there. I hope it's not my connection that is the problem, and it's just Robbie having a couple of issues with his screen. But Robbie, if you can hear me, speak up. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking to myself for a little bit longer. We are coming towards the end anyway. If anybody has any final super chats that they want to send in as a final question there, if I've lost Robbie completely here now. If anyone wants to send any final super chats, I will read those out. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap this up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the Rebuild podcast. I'll be chucking this on there as well. SeahawksDraftBlog.com. I can see that Robbie is back with us now. We lost you for a second there, Robbie.
Yeah, sorry about that. Glitch in the matrix. I don't know what happened.
The scary thing for me on a stream like this is when you disappear, I'm wondering if I'm still online.
Yeah.
And people are going, no, you're still good. You're okay.
No,
okay,
sorry about that.
We're going to wrap up very quickly here. We've done a good 48 minutes. I think we've got into all of the topics here, Robbie. I just think, it'd be nice to be able to go into an off season thinking a whole bunch of picks, a whole bunch of money. I said it before. I don't care whether 2022 is I don't want and crave wins this year. I'm willing to take time with this. If it's a bad season, it's a bad season. I'm going to be watching over here. It's BT Sport, ESPN, and I'm going to be watching those college quarterbacks, and I'm going to be watching the tape after the weekend. I'm going to be writing those guys up. It's going to be intense, the write-ups on the quarterbacks every single week as we dig into this. And I want to be studying those guys and getting my pleasure from that. And I think if Seahawks fans, for the most part, will buy into sort of that approach of, okay, the draft's going to be the most exciting bit about the next sort of 12 months, probably. But I'd like free agency to be exciting as well. And I'm just a bit worried that all that money's going to be gone when we get round there, Robbie. And they're going to say, we're going to do what we always do. But what you always do is sign people like Benson Mayowa. So that's not what you. I wish Jody Allen would tap him on the shoulder and go, you've got this way of doing things in free agency. It hasn't worked for years.
Yeah.
Try something else.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I look forward to the quarterback class. That's one of the reasons why I just don't want to. I mean, I really don't want to get Baker Mayfield. One of the reasons why is, I mean, he maybe wins us a game or two more than we probably would, with Geno Smith or Drew Lock. And then if we got Jimmy G, maybe he wins us 3 or 4 more games, maybe. But the reality is let's just take our licks this year. Let's see what we got in some of these young players that we drafted. See if we can get back to, running the football. I'm excited for the new defensive scheme. I want to see how it plays out, get some Kobe Bryant, the cornerback, and some of these other guys playing time, let them get, used to the NFL, and let's come in next year. And hopefully we'll have a new quarterback that we've drafted and we can build around, and it'll be an opportunity for really to get it. But I just, like you're saying, the money, it's a little worrisome. And I'm seeing ways that people are talking about that you can get more, and there's always ways to do it, but hopefully they just do it the right way.
Couple of final things to finish. Phil Alicia 2004. So they tried to attach this to their super chat earlier, and they wanted to ask this question. So I will come back to it. Better odds, Rob, US men's national team beats England in the World Cup, or the Hawks signing Mayfield? I think the England football team, and I will use the proper word, football team, is a very good team with a lot of exciting young players. And excitement in England is I can't remember a time when the country has been as excited about the talent coming through in England. We've not won the World Cup since 1966, and people believe that there's a generation of players coming through that could win something. And we got to the Euros final last year, as I bored everybody to death about last summer. So there is feeling that we can do very well. However, I have to say I am not optimistic at all about this upcoming World Cup, and I think there is a reasonable chance that they will lose to either the United States or Wales in the group stage. So I would say probably more likely that England will lose that game than the Seahawks signing Baker Mayfield, to be perfectly honest, just because England are not playing very well at the minute. They've just got spanked by Hungary. The manager's in a kind of a bit of a flux situation. So that is what I'm going to go with. The other thing I needed to mention, Robbie, and this is a shameless plug, and I don't care. I went to see Top Gun Maverick the other day, and I thought it was fantastic. And if anybody's not seen it, you should go and bloody watch it. And it doesn't matter whether you've watched the first one or you like the first one or not. You should go and watch it. I am going to see it for a second time this weekend. I'm taking my son, who is 9, to go and watch this. And I said, you're coming to see it. And that was it. And he's coming to watch it. And I'm making him watch it. It is all films should be made like this. It's just a superb film. Loved every second of it. People should go and see it. And I know, Robbie, that you agree.
That's true. I have already seen it twice, and it's fantastic. Totally worth it. I totally agree. It's funny when it was first announced they were making a new Top Gun, I was like, great. It's going to be like, I don't know if anybody likes Anchorman or anything like that, like a comedy. I really loved Anchorman. Yeah. And I didn't watch Anchorman 2 for absolutely the fear that it was going to be terrible, and the reviews were what it was. But Top Gun, Maverick, fantastic. Totally agree. Go watch it.
Yeah, and like Tom says, he can't stand Tom Cruise in the live chat, but it doesn't matter. Just go and watch it anyway. It's a good film.
I'll tell you, Miles Teller is fantastic in it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and look, I'm willing to go see it twice because I want them to make films like this. So I just want to, I want them to know that these kind of things work. So I'm going again I'm happy to give them some more money, and on the off chance that they'll make another film like this next year, because I'm kind of sick of all the films that come out that don't do anything for me. So I was really, really good to see. That film. So go and see it. If you haven't seen it, go and see that film. Right, that's as far as we go. Please subscribe to the channel and give the video a little like. If you want to support the channel, you can do by Patreon. The articles are trickling through on silkstrapblog.com, and they will continue to trickle through. However, they are there. And then things will ramp up again in July when training camp starts, and then especially in August and September when the preseason's on and the college football season returns. I can't wait. I am not wishing my life away, but it's pretty close to when the college football season's back and we get back into it. So until then, Robbie, always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you to everybody. The number of people watching this video was surprisingly high, given that we're doing it in the middle of June or the end of June. So thank you to everybody who has watched. Thank you to everybody who's watching on playback. Until next time, see you then.